Hey, everybody, good evening. Scott Deputy, eXp Realty, coming to you with another episode of Rum and Real Estate on a hot evening in July, mid-July. So first and foremost, my partner in crime, Neil, is on the road tonight, enjoying a little family time. I think they were out at an amusement park and they got delayed, so he's not going to make it in tonight. Maybe he'll hit us with a comment if he gets on the road, but so I'm running the show solo, as Neil did a couple of weeks ago when I was away in Puerto Rico. He carried the show solo, so I'm gonna do my best to pick up the slack tonight and have a great conversation. I'm super excited. We have a special guest in tonight from the state of Vermont, to talk about real estate in that market. And but really quickly, of course, a little cheers to everyone out there, and to Neil, wherever you are, little rum sip. So cheers, everybody. Really quickly, quick market update here. We're watching a quick trend. We saw a little uptick in listing inventory just after the July 4th holiday. It seems like what happened is that a lot of folks held back their listings as the holiday weekend approached, and just basically held off a weekend. And so we saw a really big uptick in inventory at that point, a little slowdown in the pending activity, and I think just representative that people were enjoying the holiday and traveling for the first time in a long time. So I think that's what we saw there. Seeing the pending activity pick up again and keep pace with the listing inventory. So not sure that we're seeing a definite trend in a market shift of any sort, but we're going to keep a close tab on that week over week. And of course, we'll be reporting on that and paying attention to let you know what we see as far as that goes. So, all right, well, that's my intro for tonight and commentary on the local market. And so I don't want to take up too much time before we bring in our guest, Beth Quarles from Vermont. Beth Quarles, she is with eXp Realty up in the Burlington, Vermont area. So I'm super excited to bring her in, hear a little bit about her story in real estate, and of course, find out what's happening up there in that marketplace as we take you around the country and around the world to hear about different markets and hear what people are experiencing in their neck of the woods, if you will. So welcome, Beth. Come on in. Hey there.
Hey, Scott. How are you?
I am good, thanks. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. I didn't know that I was supposed to have some rum. All I have is water.
That's okay. Well, I have a little something for both of us. So that is a Rum and Real Estate, but we don't hold our guests to the rum piece. The hosts almost always have a little rum to sip on, but guests can do as they please. So
next time.
That's a deal. Sounds good. Maybe we'll even send you up a bottle of our favorite aged rum.
Okay, that's a deal.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thanks so much for jumping on tonight. Excited to hear a little bit more about your story and your background in real estate. And then, of course, we want to definitely talk about what you're seeing there in the Burlington, Vermont and surrounding area market, and see how that compares to what everybody else is saying. So, yeah, first and foremost, give us a little background on you and your history in real estate, or even prior to.
Sure. So I'm originally from Cary, North Carolina. I grew up there, went to college there. I went to East Carolina University. When I got out of college, I went on a guided tour of Europe. On that tour of Europe, a girlfriend of mine and I, yeah, it was really great. We met a gentleman who owned a hotel in Switzerland, and he offered us a job. And what 24-year-old wouldn't want to go work in Switzerland when you had a job? So I went, and I ended up going back every year for 5 years in a 6-year span. And I loved it. And at one point, my mom said to me, when are you going to get a job? When are you going to get a real job? I had a college degree, but I really didn't have any. I just didn't think I was ready, even though I was at that point 28 years old. So in Switzerland, I had been working in a hotel and doing anything I could basically to be able to stay in Switzerland, and snowboarding and teaching snowboarding and just sort of living the life of a backpacker. So when I came home and my mom was like, okay, it's time to get a job, I thought, well, what do I want to do? One thing led to another, and I moved to Vermont, sight unseen. I didn't know a soul up here because I thought I would go to work for Burton Snowboards. Well, I'm here 4 months. I get an interview with Burton Snowboards. They offer me a job, but it was terrible. I was making more money waiting tables where I was. And one thing led to another. And after a few years of waiting tables at a really great restaurant here in Vermont, I talked my way into a wine sales job, which I did for 5 years. And from that job, this is a really abridged version, I got headhunted into pharmaceuticals. So I sold pharmaceuticals for 3 years, which is kind of, in my opinion, especially in Vermont, because we had really strict laws, it was not necessarily a tough job, but it was morally challenging for me. So the company I worked for downsized, the 1,500 people in one day. And I thought I had just had my kids. Well, they were 3 at the time. I have, they're now almost 12-year-old twin boys. And I thought, I don't want to do the whole 9 to 5 thing. I tried that for about 3 months and I thought, this is crazy. I can't do it. And everyone had always suggested real estate to me. So I took the real estate course and I started. I did everything wrong in the beginning. It was the worst time to start. It was the worst time to get into a real estate career when you've got 2 little mouths to feed, and the money wasn't, they always say you should get into real estate when you've got a year's worth of salary. Well, who has that? Right. Exactly. Nobody has that. So I got into real estate and really struggled the first 3 years. But that's kind of how I ended up, not necessarily by force, but sort of by choice. And I think I knew there was a better life for me. And that if I stuck it out, I could make it. Because I wanted to be here when my kids got off the bus. I wanted to be able to pick my kids up and be here when they were here. So that's the super abridged version. But now I'm in it. I've been in it 8 years. I can't imagine doing anything else. I absolutely love my job. Yeah. Yeah. Love it. Yeah. It's not a glamorous beginning. All right. I think there's a perception out there that it's such a glamorous life to be in the real estate business, but the reality is it's a grind. It's a very difficult lift off, if you will, right? There's a lot of burn and fuel needed to get off the ground in real estate. But like those of us that have made it past those first couple of years, then it sort of gets its hooks in you, and especially if you have a heart for service, right? So. Yeah. And, I came from the service industry, and if I've learned anything in real estate, it is you really need to know how to manage people's emotions, because that's what this job is about. If you've got a psychology degree, come to real estate, right? Because it is all about, especially if you work with first-time home buyers. Well, first-time home buyers and anybody that's selling their home that has such sentimental value in their home, they can be just as challenging as first-time home buyers. But you really have to know how to manage their emotions. It's a lot of what I do. Right. Yep, for sure. And I'm not sure if you're aware, but there might be a wolf or some type of animal trying to get at your neck there. It looks very vicious. Who is this? His name is Sheldon. He's the most thing on the planet. He's awesome. I love him. He's a handsome. He loves me so much. He cannot be next to me. I love it. Well, he's a handsome guy. Yeah, he's 10 pounds of terror. Right. I understand. That's so cool. So, all right. So 8 years in the business, currently with the XP Realty, and so not a team, solo practitioner, sorta. Right. Tell us a little bit more about that. So I spent a lot of time on teams in my prior brokerage. I learned a lot. I worked on 3 different teams there. The first one was she did a lot of foreclosures and short sales. Not glamorous, but something every realtor should know how to do. Yeah. And so I learned a lot with her. And then from there, I went to work with a woman who did a lot of luxury. high-end business. That was a good thing to learn as well. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. You went from one extreme to the other.
Yeah, you kind of have to know it all. And then I partnered with a friend of mine, which in retrospect was not a great idea. We had two different ideas of basically who was in charge and how things worked. Yeah. And up until then, I was always terrified to be on my own because I didn't think I could do it. And then the opportunity came for me to come to EXP. And honestly, I realized that at EXP, you don't necessarily have to have a team. I know there's a lot of teams at EXP and they all do really well. Mm-hmm. But for me, being on my own and attracting other people to come to EXP, we've sort of created our own, more of a support network and less of a team. So everybody that I've attracted that works at EXP sort of with me, we all help each other. We all have each other's backs. We have our own little like text thread and Facebook group where we can ask questions, just very much like the things that EXP supplies us, like workplace and so on. But if you go out of town, I've got 6 people that can cover me, or anybody else on my team, if they go out of town or they need help with showings or writing offers or anything like that. So it's a support network in a sort of a team environment.
Yeah, I love that. I call it a modern team, but it's a partnership, right? It's really a partnership of agents helping each other, and so, like you said, a support network. And so we can operate as a team to the extent that we want. But it's truly a collaborative partnership, and we do the same thing here. I have a great group of people around me as well, and we operate the same way. We're individual practitioners, but we do support each other, collaborate together, and we act like a team sometimes. And it's a great.
Honest with you, I've never seen any other brokerage actually do that or be as collaborative as EXP is, and I think that's hard for some people to digest when we don't have brick and mortar, and they say, well, how can you have any culture? How can you have any of these things when you don't have a brick and mortar, an office to go to? And I'm like, it's something you can't explain to other people, but it is so collaborative. It is so helpful. It is so supportive that it makes work easy and fun.
Yeah, exactly. And this conversation is a perfect example. I like to say, as we have these conversations with people like you around the country, that doesn't exist anywhere else, right? We don't have that same connection. I love it. I'm extremely grateful to be a part of it, and I completely agree. We're more connected and more collaborative than any local office could ever be. And
that's a broad statement, but it's really so true. I was on vacation in the Vineyard a couple of weeks ago, and right downtown in Oak Bluffs or Edgartown, I went into a real estate brokerage, an office, and it turns out they were EXP. And this agent was so excited to meet me, and we exchanged cards. She's like, I'm going to find you on Workplace. And it's just, I don't think you get that in any other places. It's a little more cutthroat everywhere. And at EXP, it's very much, how can I help you be better at your job?
That's exactly right. And I have just a couple extra years on you, Beth. I'm 25 years in the business as of June. And I know, right. And still not all gray yet. So, I'm tolerating the stress pretty well. But yeah, so I've had a few stops along the way. Great companies, all those places, but I've never experienced anything like this, and this family, this collaborative environment that we experience. So super grateful on that. So cool. So that's a little bit about, how you're operating right now. So let's get into the market. So what are you seeing in Burlington and surrounding, and maybe tell us a little bit more about your coverage area in total, because I don't want to minimize by just calling out Burlington, because it may be greater than that. But tell us a little bit about the marketplace in general, and then what you're seeing as far as the day-to-day.
Yeah, so I live in Chittenden County, which is the most populated county in the state of Vermont. It is where Burlington is. I live just about 6 miles south of Burlington, in a small town where there's maybe 6,000 or 7,000 people. So I absolutely cover everything in Chittenden County. When I first started in real estate, one of the teams that I worked on, the lady that I worked with said, you know what, if, and she was saying this about herself. She's like, if I've got time, I'll drive because Vermont is so small. She was taking listings an hour and a half away. And so I took a piece of that and have carried that through my career, that I'm like, if I've got the time, I'll do it if it's going to be worth the time and I can give it the time that it deserves. So that said, I currently have a listing that's an hour south of here. It was a referral from another EXP agent in California, and I typically wouldn't go that far. And in retrospect, I probably shouldn't have taken it, but that's a whole nother story because it's a nightmare. But it's
oh boy. Yeah.
It's a nightmare with tenants. But I helped a friend's mom sell a house 2 hours south of here. And that was another sort of one-off situation, but I would never really say that. I don't take buyers in those areas. So I mostly work Chittenden County, Washington County, which is where Stowe is, and Waterbury, and Franklin County, which is just a little further north, and then south is Addison. So I will dabble in those. I try to keep it to a 45-minute drive, and I can get to all of those spots within 45 minutes. Mm-hmm. In terms of our market, our average home sale, I think, is pretty on par with the rest of the country, which I think is about 350, 375. Our average home sale is right around there.
Okay.
You don't get a whole lot of house up here for 375.
Yeah, that's interesting. So that's higher than the Mid-Atlantic states where I am. So even in Newcastle County, Delaware, where I am, our median price is still probably a touch under 3. So maybe at this point, maybe at the 290 price point.
Yeah,
so that's,
if you go outside of Chittenden County, that's where you find they start to come down a little bit. There are pockets, like, of course, around Stowe, down around Woodstock, where they are a higher average. But for the most part, around here is 350. And right now, what's happening, I think, is the same everywhere else. You're taking a listing, you're sitting on it until Friday, then you're asking your sellers to vacate for the weekend so you can have showings all Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and you take offers Monday morning, you decide by Tuesday.
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
Yeah, it's the same. And everybody's, cash is king right now. Everybody's writing offers so much over asking, removing contingencies. I wrote an offer this week. We went in 25 over asking, all cash. We did an escalation clause up to $500,000 in $5,000 increments. And the only thing we left in there was an inspection pass fail, right? And I thought, it's cash. They need to have that safety net. And the agent called me back and was like, well, my buyers will take it if you remove that contingency. I'm like, it's the only safety net that they have. I'm like, I can't in good conscience advise my clients to just, if they sign this contract, they're buying this house regardless. And it is 120 years old, and this house flooded 20 years ago. I was like, there's just no way. No way. So we ended up coming to some sort of agreement where if what came back in the inspection was more than a certain dollar amount, we reserve the right to walk away. Mm-hmm. So it's our only safety net. But it's happening hand over fist everywhere up here. And it's as you mentioned when we were speaking earlier, buyers are part of the problem, but the sellers are as well. The sellers are expecting people to remove all these contingencies. And, like you said, if the buyers are going to do it, then it's going to stay like that. So not that it's a problem, because everybody in real estate is actually really busy right now, but it's very concerning. It's very concerning, and I don't think it's sustainable.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It remains to be seen, right? And I agree with you. It's so difficult to be in a buyer's agent role and support someone giving up every last concession that they possibly can. At the same time, these buyers need to move, they need to buy, and if they're willing, then we have to get ourselves out of the way to some extent to say, look, we've talked it all out. you understand the options and the ramifications. If it's still a green light, then so be it. I sort of feel like, Beth, and again, it's a little too early to tell, but if this type of activity is sustained for another 6 months, let's say, I'm starting to believe that the transaction as we know it is going to evolve, permanently. That inspections will go away, and the contingency laden contracts that we've been writing all of our lives are going to change in a different way, because that really is it's the biggest stressor. It's the biggest point of tension in a real estate transaction, is the due diligence after everyone signs on the line.
Yeah.
And I just wonder, as buyers get conditioned to forego these things and become maybe more savvy before they buy, they start to understand costs of repairs and budgeting, and maybe technology is going to facilitate that a little bit as well, where there are going to be tools and estimators that people will rely on more proactively before they write an offer to purchase. And it's possible, I don't know, it's just an opinion, but I think it's possible that if this activity continues for another 6 months or a year, then why would we ever go back? Like, if everyone's got their head around doing it a certain way, then it would seem odd to me to go backwards and go back to all these contingencies and due diligence. I don't know. It's just a hypothetical, but
I think that's interesting, because if, I haven't been in this as long as you have, but younger agents, right? I've been doing this 8 years. And older agents will tell you about the days when you went inside and you sat down and there was a book, right? And you went through the book. And so if anything so I feel like real estate's constantly evolving. And maybe this is one of the catalysts that moving forward 6 months from now, we're going to say, okay, we don't see this changing. How do we make this work so it's a little more win-win for both parties? Because I feel like right now, the buyers are taking all the risk. The part that makes me nervous about that is, so I also mentor new agents. And what makes me nervous about that is making sure that these new agents that are writing a contract for the first time are very clear with their buyers when you're removing these contingencies as to exactly what that means. Because it took me 8 years to learn a lot of this stuff.
That's
right? And if they're not completely transparent and clear, as you mentioned, with the buyers, that yes, if you're going to remove this inspection contingency, this is what's going to happen. Or when you put in an escalation clause, this is what's going to happen. You could be responsible for this much more money in cash at closing. If you're not absolutely clear, I think it's going to open a lot of new realtors to much more liability if we're not careful.
Yeah, I agree.
And maybe they end up learning the hard way.
Yeah, I agree that there's got to be a proactive disclosure and documentation of these conversations to say, hey, look, we covered the bases, and you are in a situation where you need to move forward anyway. And this was your choice. We talked it through, and this was your choice. So yeah, I think there's going to be another layer of documentation where, and I've already seen it down here, where there's a waiver addendum where the broker is looking for an extra piece of paper where the buyer says, yes, we've agreed to waive all contingencies. There's sort of a second piece of paper, like, the paper to support the paper.
Right.
So it's interesting. And they're willing. They're doing it willingly just to get the property and to be the winning bid. So
it blows my mind.
Yeah. And so we have somebody looking on. April's a friend down here, works on a high producing team here in the Newcastle County area. And April, I agree. I'm absolutely positive that home inspectors have felt the pain of this. They're definitely not doing as many inspections over the last 4 months, especially. No question their business is down, right? Because the only offers winning are the ones without inspection contingencies. So all the houses that are trading, they're as is. There's no inspections being done. So
not only that, but I think they're also feeling the strain because of liability. So those of us that have a contingency of a pass-fail inspection, I think the inspectors feel a huge amount of pressure because they go in, if they find X, Y, or Z and something ends up terminating, or they don't find it, and then the buyer comes back to them a year later and says, you didn't really do a job here, I think they're feeling a little bit of pressure in that sense, of really being the one that's on the hook. This is the only thing that's going to keep this person from buying this house. So they have to get it right. Yeah. So you have to have a good inspector right now.
Yeah. I think that's an interesting point. And I see, again, the evolution of this maybe where the inspectors need to start going to the seller side, where they're going to be doing pre-listing inspections, and then those reports will be available for a buyer to accept or not. Like, right. Here you go. You want to come by my house? Here's the report. We've already had it done. You can accept this information or not. And if you don't, then move on. We'll wait for the next person. Right.
And as a seller, they can say, this is what we're willing to address, what we're not willing to address, or here's what came up. Yeah. I think that raises a really good point, because I think that's who the onus should really be on. The sellers, in my opinion, I think sellers should be doing pre-inspections and saying, this is my house. This is everything that's wrong with it. Here's what I'm willing to do. Here's what I'm not willing to do. And here's about how much it'll cost you to decide whether you want to buy this house or not.
That's it. And then that takes a lot of stress and tension right out of the transaction, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Right? Now everybody knows exactly what to expect.
Right. And the liability on the seller, because there's a liability on the seller too if they don't disclose something.
Right. So, it's all conjecture right now, but I think it's very possible that we are in an evolutionary moment right now, and the transaction as we know it might look a whole lot different come 2022 and beyond. And there's a lot of different reasons for that. Some of it is market driven, but some of it is technology, and some of it is that, people are just going to say, you know what, maybe the old way wasn't the best way.
Yeah, I have to say, it's one of the things I love about this job. It's never the same thing twice. It's never the same day twice. It's never, I don't care how many times you work with the same client. It's just never the same transaction. And I love that about it. You have to constantly be, on your feet and in your mind and collaborating with other agents, in my opinion. We're all only as good as everyone else. And so I have a handful of realtors that aren't at EXP in Vermont and in other states that I call, and I say, hey, what are you seeing? And how would you handle this? And it's nice to have that. That's what makes this job so great.
Yeah, I agree. And to have that problem solving capability, put those muscles to work on a daily basis, and and try to find win-win solutions, like you mentioned.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So yeah, very interesting to see what will come of all this. But thank you, April, for chiming in there. And it's funny she brought that up, because I did have that conversation with a colleague about 3 weeks ago who was going to speak at a meeting of home inspectors, actually certified home inspectors in our area. And I said that to him right before he was heading out to that meeting. I said, you might want to check with them and see how they're feeling about their business. Like, I'm guessing that they're all feeling some pain in their volume of inspections that they're doing.
Yeah, they're as much a part of this process as we all are, and I think sometimes realtors forget that they're also part of the liability. And I think a huge pressure for them, to April's point, is putting pressure on them for their liability aspect in the whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and then here's another comment from April that says, home with a pristine inspection would mitigate buyers from using the inspection waiver as a creative tactic and driving buyers to throw even more money into their offer. Yeah, it's a good point, right? The offers are going to be stronger and better because there's more confidence.
Right. So if you're a listing agent, I think the trend moving forward will be to get your sellers to do a pre-inspection. I've always suggested that to my sellers anyway. I'm like, because if there's an elephant in the room, we need to know about it before we get under contract. Wouldn't you rather spend the $500 now on an inspection to know that you have mold or you have mice or you have whatever, because then you can address it, and then there's no coming back and negotiating on the price after the inspection. It's a much smarter move, in my opinion. But I also understand that all sellers don't want to do that because they're like, we need to go as fast as we can, get as much money as possible, and I'm not spending $500 on that. I'm like, well, it's a small insurance price to pay to go ahead and know what issues there might be in advance.
Yeah. Yeah. So the question is, the other question that comes up then, is that going to become a differentiator for agents to build their business on? Is that going to be a unique selling proposition to say, as a listing agent, this is our mode of operation, and we can now document why this is going to net you a higher number at the end of the day. You know, so it's a lot. There's a lot to consider in all this stuff to say, well, you know, let's be ahead of it. Let's be the one that now only works this way. Like,
yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Like,
I think it'll be an interesting, like you said, 6 months to see where, and I don't know that 6 months is the answer. Maybe it's a year. Maybe it's a year from now we have some sort of shift. But I also don't anticipate us having the market drop out. Like I think a lot of people are predicting, like in 2008. I don't see that happening. I'm not a financial planner or a wizard, and I always say to my clients, I didn't get into real estate for my math skills because it's just not my wheelhouse. But the trajectory that we're on right now, I don't see slowing down. And pockets of slowing down, like you had mentioned, like right now around July 4th during school just let out and everybody's traveling and doesn't really want to, and with a pandemic, like slowly letting up. I don't know how your numbers are, but we're doing and have been doing so great in Vermont that we hit a July slowdown just because everyone started to travel. Everyone go somewhere when school let out.
Yeah, I agree. I think, yes, and the same in Delaware. Our numbers are way down, which is awesome. And I agree. I think this 4th of July was the first like full on, we can do whatever, go wherever we want, do whatever we want, and be together. And so I think a lot of people were ready to bust out, and that did take some attention away from real estate, no question about it. And then I also agree to your point. The fundamentals are so dramatically different this time around than they were in 2007. You know, I've seen reports from the NAR economist and others. You know, this lack of inventory has been building for 10 years, right? This, you know, for a variety of reasons, including, you know, new construction not keeping up with the pace of demand year over year for a good 10 years, right? All the builders were so gun shy because they were left holding the bag on the last one, right? The music stopped, and, you know, they had all these developments underway with no buyers, right? And so it's taken them a long time to feel good about going great guns to build at a faster, higher rate. And they're nowhere near catching up. And that's been years and years and years in the making. And that's only one piece of the inventory puzzle. You know, you throw in the lack of foreclosures, you throw in the more folks aging in place. I mean, it's a multi-pronged scenario, and it's just completely different. And then, as we just talked about a moment ago, the people that are buying houses right now are the absolute most qualified, right? The only people winning are cash or low leveraged financing, right? It's not, you know, 100% financing or FHA, or, you know, unfortunately those folks are getting beat up left and right.
I haven't seen an RD loan in 2 years. Yeah. I don't know if you guys have rural development down there where it's 100%. I haven't seen one of those in a long time. And in the last year and a half, I've only done one VA loan. And this guy was so qualified because he already has a really good job. And so right now it is at least mostly conventional and cash. Yeah, absolutely. And it's so hard to do.
Same in this marketplace. And it's a shame for those buyers looking to take advantage of those products. But again, just from a greater market perspective, the only folks that are winning and buying homes right now are the most qualified, the most financially stable. So if they came up against an emergency or the market shifted, they would be able to weather it versus last time where we had opposite forces in play. So I agree with you 100%. There's going to be a balancing at some point. We're not going to see a sudden, you know, drop off the ledge and 30% loss of value. Those fundamentals just don't exist, barring any other unforeseen, you know, worldwide catastrophes.
Right.
But but gosh, we just came through one, and look at what's happened in the marketplace. So
yeah. And could you have imagined at the beginning of COVID that that's what would have happened with your business? I could have
right.
never imagined. In the beginning of COVID, I was terrified.
No way. No
I
way.
was terrified. Still working, not at the level that I am now, which I've learned a lot through COVID. I've learned how to be a little more efficient, how to handle more buyers and more situations. Because again, I'm my own agent, but I was terrified because we had it wasn't 3 months, but it was a solid 2 months where you couldn't go in and show homes at all. And, everybody was scared. And I think it's not anything to sort of boast or gloat about, but most realtors have done really well during this pandemic. We've all come out of this on the other end, making more money than I think we ever thought we would have made. And I would have never imagined that in a million years at the beginning of this type of pandemic.
Yeah, I think that's true to some extent. I think the most professional, the most committed folks are the ones that were able to really thrive through this whole thing. And then I think there was a separation, right? For those that weren't as committed and not quite as professional, they probably felt a lot of pain. As things changed. So,
yeah,
but
if you were a new realtor in the beginning of COVID, you're probably not still a realtor.
Right, exactly. It kicked you out a lot faster than average, right? Because
Yes.
we do have an 80% churn rate, right, in real estate, and that's usually within 2 years. So it may have accelerated that, right? 6
Yeah.
months. Whoa, never mind. Wrong
Yeah.
turn. Let me go back. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. And so how is just to sort of wrap up as far as your marketplace up there, do you have new construction? Do you have any kind of volume of that? Do you have unbuilt land?
New construction is definitely on the uptick, because we sort of run out of space. Vermont is challenging to build in because of Act 250. It is very protective of the land, which is one of the reasons why a lot of people like to move here. It's very green. You don't see billboards. You don't see neon signs. Vermont you have to jump through a lot of hoops to build anything up here. So that takes a lot of people out of the game. So there is a little bit of an uptick on that. Mostly, aside from building, most of the clientele has been, and I don't know if this is the same where you are, people coming from out of state. I sold more houses last year. Well, basically, I sold houses last year sight unseen to people moving from other states. I had never done that before. Never sold anybody a house before that they didn't go in. Last year, I probably sold 10 to 15 houses to people that they didn't go in. And they showed up a week after closing, or it was just mind blowing. And that's still happening to some extent. We have a lot of people coming from New York City. We had a lot of people coming from California, believe it or not. I worked with a gentleman at the beginning of this year, moved from Idaho. I had some couples move from Cincinnati, from Arizona, all buying their houses sight unseen. And that was huge pressure on my part. Because if I didn't do my job.
Talk about an extra piece of paper. Here, you better sign this piece of paper.
Unbelievable. And so I was semi-panicked. I was like, okay, if I were moving across country and buying a house sight unseen, side note, I don't know that I could ever do that.
No.
But what would I want to know? So I was driving around the town where the house was and saying, well, here's your grocery store. This is where you'll be going to the grocery store. Here's where the kids' school might be, and this is what the neighbors look like across the street. And I know you can get a lot of that on Google, but I think there's some sort of firsthand experience, even though that's not really firsthand, it's secondhand, but just changing the game and how I was working for those folks, I became sort of like a city guide. Right? I wanted to be sure that they knew where their library was going to be, where their grocery store was going to be, how far away of a drive is it, and what are the neighbors look like behind them, who are the neighbors to the side, and is it a busy street? And so it changed so much of the way that I worked in terms of A, wanting my clients to be happy first and foremost, and B, making sure I covered myself in terms of liability if I didn't tell them something.
Yeah.
So it's been really, really interesting.
Super, super interesting. And again, is this a harbinger to say, wait a minute, if some people can do it, can more people do it that way, right? And is that part of this evolution that we're talking about and how business is going to get done in the future? Because, the technology is enabling this to some extent, right? Now that you can, be on a FaceTime or some, video technology and have a live interaction, if you will, showing these aspects, whether it's a walkthrough of the house or a walkthrough of the city or the surrounding area, like you can get a pretty good picture. Like, again, I have a hard time getting my head around it, but again, people are doing it. And if some people can do it, more people can do it. And I just wonder if that's what we're looking at here, a real evolution in how this whole thing really works and how we're going to be best suited to continue, as our role facilitating.
Yeah, I certainly think there's no going back from this. There's no going back from how, I dare to say how simple we make this for buyers moving, but that's what I think our job will be, is to manage their emotions and make sure it's a comfort level for them to be able to make this, we're going to become like video tour guides, making sure they understand everything. It's part of the job.
100% agree that it's going to be about the efficiency and ease of transaction. And that speaks to what we talked about earlier. And it speaks to what you just mentioned around this sort of third party, video technology enabled interaction.
It's funny because we'll be the one in 10 years saying, oh, do you remember when you had to show people property?
Right, exactly.
All the new agents, they'll be like, what? You actually showed people property? I'd be like, that's the way we used to do it.
That's what that's what we're talking about, right? The book, right? Oh, you mean you used to have an MLS book, right? And now the next thing could be, oh, you actually had to open the door for people and they would walk through the house in person?
Or put them in your car and drive around with them?
Yeah, remember those days. Even that is a thing of the past.
It totally is. Totally is. I don't put anybody in my car.
So I haven't done it in years.
That's why I like this job. It's never the same thing. Never, ever the same thing. It's always changing. And I think those of us that stay afloat are changing with the industry. You gotta figure out how to shift and make that work for your business and for the client, so that ultimately the client's getting the best experience. Right.
Exactly. Right. It's driven by the consumer experience. Completely agree.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Well, this is awesome, Beth. Thank you so much for sharing. One quick tidbit I just can't resist. There was a little announcement, since both of us happen to be at eXp Realty, the fastest growing best brokerage of all time, my opinion. But there was a little announcement today. I don't know if you happen to catch it, but there was a little announcement on the lending side. There's a new partnership being created. Did you happen to see that?
I didn't. I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, it was kind of late breaking, but there was an announcement today that eXp Realty is partnering with a company called Kind Lending, and the guy behind Kind Lending is Glenn Stearns. He was the founder of Stearns Lending and the guy that was the very first undercover billionaire, if you ever watched that show. But he got connected to Glenn Sanford back in the early spring. Through Grant Cardone, I believe, actually. And they just announced today that they are going to be rolling out a lending arm under the brand of Success Lending. So they're going to use the Success brand that eXp World Holdings owns. And they are going to do a joint venture with Kind Lending that is a Glenn Stearns company. And they're going to call it Success Lending. And that's sort of the latest and greatest headline coming out of eXp Realty, that we're going to be rolling out an official lender partner, which we haven't had. Another
reason why I love being at eXp. If it weren't the marketing and the branding and the culture, which I know we touched on a little bit earlier, it's hard to believe that the culture at eXp is what it is when there is no brick and mortar. But I've never found a more collaborative, helpful, group of agents across the country. And I know more real estate agents across the country now than I ever did with any other brokerage. I've never seen anything like it. Anytime I go back to North Carolina, I run into people, or I try and stop by an office down there just to introduce myself. And everybody's always really happy to make those connections. And it's like nothing else.
100% agree. I've made so many great connections, like yourself, Florida, North Carolina, California, Texas. I mean, you name it. Minnesota. I have friends through EXP now that I would have never had in real estate, thanks to this model and the way that we collaborate through many different channels. So it's so cool. You know, we now are really a global force where we get to, you know, make friendships and collaborate and learn from people all over the place. And it's refreshing. Great. It's refreshing. That's
great.
But yeah, so keep an eye out. Success Lending, that was just that news broke today, and I think it's going to be a big deal once it really rolls out. So
good. Well, thanks for having me, Scott. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Beth. I know we went way longer than I ever anticipated, but it was a great conversation. Thank you so much for sharing about your story and about what's happening up there in the Vermont market. And we appreciate meeting your four-legged there as well. Making a cameo, so that's awesome. So yeah, so thank you so much. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Thanks April for your commentary there.
Thank you, Scott. Have a great night.
And yep, thanks Beth, and I hope to be talking to you real soon.
All right, bye.
All right, take care. See you everybody. See you soon.